There's an ancient story behind a modern psychological tactic to help resist temptation. More than 3,000 years ago, the Greek hero Ulysses faced a problem that no amount of physical strength or courage could solve. He was sailing home from the Trojan War, and his route would take him past the island of the Sirens. These were mythical creatures whose song was so beautiful, so irresistible, that every sailor who heard it was compelled to steer toward the island, crash into the rocks, and die. Ulysses wanted to hear the song. He was curious, perhaps even arrogant enough to think he could handle it. But he was also wise enough to know that in the moment, his willpower alone wouldn't be enough. So he devised a plan to hear the song of the Sirens safely. Hey there, it's me, Core, and you're listening to Exercising Self-Control from Fitness to Flourishing. Ulysses ordered his sailors to plug their ears with beeswax so they couldn't hear the song at all. Then he had them tie him tightly to the mast of the ship. His final instruction: no matter what he said, no matter how much he begged or commanded them to release him, they were not to untie him until they were safely past the island. It worked. Ulysses heard the siren's song. He was nearly driven mad by it, screaming at his sailors to free him. But they had their orders, and they held course. The ship passed safely. Ulysses survived. This story is the origin of what psychologists and behavioral scientists now call the Ulysses Pact, or sometimes the Ulysses Contract. The core idea is straightforward. Change your environment in advance so the undisciplined action becomes difficult or impossible to take in the moment. Essentially, you make a pre-commitment that removes choice from the moment of highest temptation, which shifts the need for conscious self-control to a pre-designed system. The goal being to mitigate the conflict between the prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and rational thinking, and the limbic system, which spurs immediate gratification and impulsive behavior. With this pact, you're not relying on willpower when temptation strikes. You're removing the option before temptation has a chance to show up. Here are two simple examples most of us can relate to. Example 1, your phone. You sit down to do focused work, but you know your phone is a distraction. Rather than fighting the urge to check it every few minutes, you put it on airplane mode and leave it in a drawer in another room. The temptation doesn't disappear, but the friction of acting on it is high enough that you stay focused. Example 2, junk food. You're trying to eat well, but you know that if there are treats in the cupboard at 10 p.m., you're going to eat them. So you don't buy them. Or if they're already in the house, you throw them away. And you make sure they are made inedible, not just sitting in the garbage in their packaging where you could retrieve them, when no one's watching, of course. In both cases, you're doing what Ulysses did, making a decision in advance when your rational mind is in control that protects you from your expected future lapse when willpower is likely too low to be of use. Now, to be clear, this strategy works. It's practical, it's evidence-backed, and when implemented well, it genuinely helps people follow through on their intentions. To understand the limits of the Ulysses Pact, consider what happens in a structured residential weight loss program. Participants arrive at a facility where the environment is completely controlled. There is no junk food available. Meals are prepared for them. Nutritious, portion-controlled, designed by professionals. Exercise sessions are scheduled, supervised, and non-negotiable. Coaches are present. Accountability is built into every hour of the day. And it works. People lose weight, sometimes significant amounts of it. In that environment, with those structures in place, they succeed. But here's the problem. The statistics for long-term weight maintenance after these programs end are poor. Many participants, more than 50%, regain the weight within 2 to 3 years of returning home. Long-term studies suggest as many as 95% of participants regain all their lost weight within 1 to 5 years. Why? Because the environment that produced the result no longer exists. Back in their normal lives, the junk food is available again. No one is scheduling their workouts. No coach is holding them accountable. The external structure is gone, and without it, the old patterns return. This is the fundamental limitation of the Ulysses Pact. It works by removing the need to exercise self-control, which means it never actually builds self-control. There's a second issue worth naming, and it's one that often gets overlooked. To implement the Ulysses Pact, you already need a degree of self-discipline. You have to have the foresight to recognize the problem in advance. You have to make the decision to act on it. You have to follow through, putting the phone in the drawer, throwing out the food, tying yourself to the mast. That requires an act of will. It requires discipline. It requires the very thing for which the strategy is supposed to compensate. So the strategy isn't a substitute for self-control. At best, it's a tool that someone with some self-discipline can use to make things easier. And even then, it only works when the circumstances cooperate, when you have control over your environment, when the temptation can actually be removed, when the structure can be maintained. But what happens when it can't? This is why in my work, I focus on strategies that build the underlying capacity for self-control, not just workarounds that make it temporarily unnecessary. Think of it in terms of physical training, because that's a framework most of us understand intuitively. If you want to get stronger, you don't avoid lifting heavy things. You lift heavy things repeatedly over time, and your body adapts. The difficulty is the point. Interacting with the resistance is what produces the result. Self-control works the same way. Every time you face a temptation and choose not to act on it, not because the option was removed, but because you decided not to, you are building something. You are developing a capacity that travels with you, regardless of your environment, regardless of the circumstances. The Ulysses Pact, used exclusively, does the opposite. It removes the opportunity to wrestle with the resistance. And without resistance, there's no adaptation. There's no growth. None of this means the Ulysses Pact is useless. It isn't. Used intelligently, as one tool among many, it has genuine value, especially in the early stages of building a new habit, when the capacity for self-control in a particular area is still developing, or understanding the factors involved is unclear. But it should be a scaffold, not a permanent structure, a temporary support while you build the real skill and strength required. The goal is to reach a point where you don't need the phone in the drawer, where you can sit with the distraction present and choose not to engage with it, where the junk food can be in the cupboard and you can leave it there, where your self-control is robust enough to function in the real world with all its temptations and unpredictability intact. That's the kind of discipline worth building, and that's what I focus on. Strategies to develop the genuine, durable inner strength to exercise self-control, whatever the circumstances. That's it for today. Catch you next time.